Hello, Namaskar, welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. Two major crises have hit India. One is, of course, the Bangladesh crisis, and the other is a more recent Hindenburg crisis. And so far, it does appear as if the government has very deftly handled both crises. Let's talk a little bit about the Hindenburg crisis. I will, of course, expand on this crisis more in detail later in the podcast. But Monday morning was supposed to be a terrible morning when the stock market would crash and investor wealth would be wiped out, but nothing of that sort has happened. We are in Tuesday today when I'm recording this podcast, and so far also the markets are normal, up and down as markets normally behave. So nothing of that sort has happened so far. So that's the first part of it. And the second part of it is something very significant happened yesterday. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, she made a couple of statements on Bangladesh and on India, which I think are very significant, which shows that the government diplomacy, the government backroom efforts, behind the scene efforts have been bearing fruit. They have probably impressed on the United States certain things. But first, let me tell you what she has said. The first statement which Karine said was that the US government, she categorically denied that the US government was not involved in the Bangladesh crisis. They had nothing to do with the coup d'etat which has happened in Bangladesh. That's the first part of it. And the second statement which she made in response again to a question about India was, she used these words that the India-US relationship is one of the most consequential in the world. We work closely with India on our most vital priorities. Very, very significant, on our most vital priorities, which of course could also mean Bangladesh, it could mean Pakistan, it could mean China, certainly. It could mean a lot of things. And therefore, the statement has been made by the United States. And third, again, in response to a question in that same press meeting, where somebody asked her about the Hindu genocide question in Bangladesh, and Karine said that we are monitoring the situation, but the human rights situation or these issues are issues we take seriously. These are not her exact words, but I'm just paraphrasing the words which she said regarding the Bangladesh Hindu genocide situation. And a lot of observers, a lot of people who understand foreign policy, a lot of people who read between the lines agree that these are relatively positive statements from the United States, because the US also realizes there had been a buildup of a lot of negativity about the US in India the last few days vis-a-vis Bangladesh, about the treatment which was being meted out to the Hindus of Bangladesh, and probably the role of the United States. So certain degree of clarification has come in from the United States. I'm not saying this has solved the problem between this entire region, or that it sets our doubts to rest, but it's a start anyway. It's a good start, and I see the hand of the Indian government behind all this, some very deft, mature handling by the Indian government, which I'm going to talk about a little more in detail here. But before I do that, as always, I would urge all of you to please subscribe to my channel, the CAA Show. The CAA Show, as all of you know, we come up with these very interesting podcasts, very interesting ideas, and of course, I'm sure you like them. We would also really appreciate if you can like the show, and besides liking the show, please do share our video. If you have liked the video, please share the video with your friends, with your colleagues, with your peers. That's the way we can spread the CAA Show with more and more number of people. So that's, of course, my message of the day. Now let's dive right back into the issue we are discussing about. How has the Indian government so far managed to achieve this degree of relief, I would say, this degree of restraint, this degree of some kind of a caution which has come in, where things are kind of subsiding, they're not inflaming more and more or going out of control on both these fronts. I'm going to talk about that, but again, a caveat before I do that. See, these are both evolving situations. It's not as if the Bangladesh crisis has been resolved. It's not as if the Hindenburg crisis has also been resolved, and I'll tell you why. Both crises can spin out of control at any given point in time, so we need to keep that in mind. But so far, I would say both have been handled very, very well. Now, first let me talk of the Hindenburg crisis, then I'm going to talk of the Bangladesh crisis, and I will explain to you the very interesting role of the government in dousing the fires regarding the Hindenburg firestorm. Why do I even use the word firestorm for the Hindenburg crisis? And I'll tell you why. To my mind, the Hindenburg crisis presently was actually even more important and even more significant than the Bangladesh crisis. At the end of the day, yes, our hearts go out for the ill treatment which is going on with the Bangladeshi Hindus. We want something to be done about that, but let's face facts. They are not our citizens. What really matters to us, and then what should also matter to us, is what happens to our own citizens. And the Hindenburg crisis had the potential to wipe out a whole lot of investor wealth, not only from the Adani stocks, but from all kinds of stocks in the stock market. In fact, it had the potential to derail the entire stock market. I would even say impact the Indian economy to that extent. It was a very, very serious challenge which was mounted, but as I said, some very deft maneuvering by the government has at the moment doused those fires. Now, what did the government really do? If you follow the trail of communication which has been coming from the government, from the authorities, from the regulators, then there have been two kinds of statements which have been coming. One is, of course, statements made in a personal capacity by Madhavi Butch regarding the kind of investments she had done and the due diligence which she had done vis-a-vis SEBI. And of course, then the other statements have been coming, they have been coming from SEBI, that is a SEBI as a regulatory body, and there has been an endorsement of that which has also come from the finance ministry and also from the BJP government spokespersons also. And what has been the basic line which the government has chosen, which has resonated with the people of India? The line has been, and you would think, oh, it is about the fact to invoke our patriotic feelings. Of course, that is important. But the very intelligent line which they have done is that both SEBI, Madhavi Butch, and to that extent also the spokespersons in the government have been hinting that there is a difference between what a private citizen does, where a private citizen invests, and what senior functionaries in the government or the regulatory authorities do or allowed to do. That differentiation has been very clearly made. And I will, of course, not go into the technicalities of this entire thing, but in a very, very broad sense, I will explain this, that who are Madhavi Butch, who are Dhaval Butch, and what do we mean by private citizens out here. In this capacity, I'd like to confess something out here, that I do personally know Dhaval Butch. Dhaval Butch was not only my batchmate, but he was not only a schoolmate, but he and I were in the same class together. We have studied together from KG onwards to class 12th. Our school was in Delhi, St. Columbus School. So I do know a little bit about Dhaval Butch. I'm not for a moment saying that he's a close friend, not at all. I haven't seen him for so many years now. But I do know a little bit about the man, so I can vouch a little bit about him. Dhaval was, right from the beginning, was a brilliant student. No question about it. He was in fact the school topper. He was supposed to get into IIT at the very first attempt, which he couldn't, but he got into IIT Delhi in the second attempt. Then I think he went to IIM after that. He's had a stellar corporate career. He went into Hindustan Levers. He was in fact in Levers, he was part of this category. There was a certain category of people who are earmarked to become the CEOs of the company. He was part of that elite group. Which shows that he was obviously very good at his job. Then he joined then I think he left HUL and he joined other places. He was for a long time in Singapore. The point which I'm making is that Dhaval Butch is not some backroom manipulator or some shady character, who is trying to force his wife into making these kind of purchases or who has certain vested interests. He has been a professional. He has been a very well respected professional in his field, and so has been Madhavi Buch for that matter. My wife is a banker, and she tells me that my wife is a very senior banker, was rather, and she knows about Madhavi Buch, who was actually in the same college as she, at St. Stephen's. I think they were 1 year apart in maths honors. And Madhavi was again a brilliant person. She was a very senior person at ICICI Bank, and therefore, it's one of the allegations which Hindenburg Research makes, that how come Dhaval Buch was appointed as a senior advisor in Blackstone. I just told you about the corporate career of this man. If that kind of a person doesn't get in as an advisor to Blackstone, then who will? Would it be one of the people from Hindenburg Research? All these muckrakers. That's the funny thing which actually emerges. So the short point being, both Madhavi and Dhaval are professionals. Both of them are very well educated. Both of them are accomplished individuals in their fields. And when you are senior corporate people, and I know this, I'm not a corporate person, my wife is a senior corporate person, so I know that obviously as a corporate person, you earn a certain amount of money, you invest that money. You invest, whether you want to invest it in mutual funds, you want to invest in certain kind of savings, you want to invest in certain funds, you want to invest in certain companies. You are absolutely legitimately allowed to do that, and opening offshore accounts is also legitimate as long as you're declaring all those things. They have done that. And before Madhavi Buch joined SEBI, she had not only disclosed all the nature of their holdings, but I think that entire thing had been transferred to Dhaval Buch, also, as she has said. And Hindenburg makes the allegation that maybe it was 1 or 2 weeks later she sold off some shares and whatever. Once you run out of arguments, then you make arguments like these. The short point, and this is the point which people in India have completely understood, because at the end of the day, every Indian is an aspiring or a real investor. Everybody wants to invest so that their money grows, so that they make some profit out of it, that their lifestyle improves. And there have been politicians who are saying, don't invest in the stock market. I'll talk of that politicians also a little later. But the ordinary Indian understood this differentiation between a private citizen and between a senior functionary either in the government or in these regulatory authorities. And if due diligence had been done, if the declarations had been made, and in certain cases, as Madhavi Buch said, that she has recused herself, and those would be on record. All one has to do is to check the records. Then what is the problem? The problem really was that not only Hindenburg, but certain opposition politicians, certain vested media interest hostile to this government, they were all trying to cloak this entire thing as a cloak and dagger thing, when it was not. And the people of India understood that as a private citizen, you have every right to invest your money and make it grow. Rich, medium, poor, anyone has the right to do that, and that's what they also did. They declared it, and then she moved on into a regulatory authority role. So that was the first point of the government. I think it was smart strategy. The clarifications were given not only by Madhavi, but they were given by SEBI. They were endorsed by the finance ministry, and that is why this calmed people on a Sunday night, and by Monday morning, the other big thing was that the government, by very, very maturely, with restraint and with calmness, they dealt with this issue. There was no hyper activity, there was no hyper, we will go after Hindenburg, we will do this, we will do that, or we will go after the opposition politician. Statements were coming on later, but Monday morning opened, and the government did not allow, number two, the panic to set in. That was the most brilliant thing which the government did, because once panic sets in, because share markets, as we all know, are driven by sentiment, and once the sentiment turns negative, it turns one of disillusionment, it turns one of skepticism or doubt, That is where the stock market falls, and that the government did not allow to happen in a natural, organic, mature, restrained manner. Then the third thing which the government did, they highlighted the agent provocator role of Mr. Rahul Gandhi. And I'm not saying it, but you just have to see the video of Mr. Rahul Gandhi which he made, and this was freely distributed, and a lot of people saw that, where even without verifying facts, that is on a Sunday morning, even without going into the details, even without bothering to do a cross-reference checkup, he straight away declared, why hasn't Madhabi Butch resigned? What is this collusion between Adani and the government? Straight away. And then, more damagingly, the call was made for the people of India not to invest in the stock markets. That to me was almost borderline criminality, if you ask me. And the government highlighted this particular video. And very, very smartly, after a long time, I found that Amit Walia was completely hit the bullseye. That is the IT spokesperson of the BJP, when he highlighted the fact that doesn't Mr. Rahul Gandhi have stocks and shares of his own? Because if they are declared and they're running into a few crores, then why is he stopping, or why is he dissuading people to invest from the stock market? Aren't these double standards that you make money for yourself, but you literally allow other people to lose investor wealth, to lose their money, that they don't grow and they shrink more and more in poverty? And that was the point which very smartly was made by Mr. Malviya at that point in time. And along with that, the fourth strategy of the government was that they highlighted the role of the retail investor, that really we are protecting the retail investor, we are protecting the small investor, the man on the street who looks at the stock market as a means to grow his money in a legitimate, in an absolutely correct way, and therefore nothing will be done which will shake their confidence. And this strategy of the government actually bore fruit on Monday morning when the markets stabilized, and it was ordinary trading. Nothing really out of the ordinary which happened on Monday, and so far also on Tuesday. And above all, the people of India, the ripple effects of this entire strategy was that the people of India finally understood that who stands for that their money should grow, that their investor wealth should grow. They understood, they got this message very clearly. As I said, they learned to differentiate between gossip, between innuendos, between cover-ups, between an obfuscation of the truth. They understood that. They learned to sift between the untruth and the truth. They saw through that video of Mr. Rahul Gandhi what he was really trying to do, as the government is now alleging that he was basically trying to wreck the Indian stock markets, impact the economy in a terrible manner, so that, as the politics of a lot of people are, that they ride, they achieve their victories, they achieve their success on the heaps and the ruins of ordinary people. That was the suggestion which came from the ruling party. And all this combined, all this synchronization of restraint, clarification, because that statement of Madhabi was also very, very important, that our finances are an open book, anyone can see that. All these statements, all the maturity and the restraint, and then the pinpointed collaring of what the opposition and certainly the forces behind Hindenburg, which everybody says is probably George Soros or some foreign governments or foreign intelligence agencies, the highlighting of that particular role, and therefore Monday morning was contained. The stock market did not crash, and the government handled that situation very deftly. That's the first part of it. Now, second part of it. And now I'm referring to the Bangladesh situation. How did the White House press secretary make that particular statement? What came about it? Of course, it was in response to certain questions which are asked of her. But the very fact that these were more positive statements, more towards which the Indian government would like to hear, and probably shows a softening of tone on part of the US regarding this entire situation out here. We all know that the US has been a little displeased with the Indian government because of that Russia trip, of the Prime Minister's Russia trip. We all know that. They have been, of course, very, very desperately trying to get India in their corner vis-a-vis the Quad as against China. We know about all those things. But obviously the Russia visit, the Russia-Ukraine war, that is the trigger point for all these things. Now, all kinds of rumors are flying, all kinds of conspiracy theories are coming out that the United States wants to acquire this island of Bangladesh. They want to carve out some kind of a Christian state which has parts of Burma and Manipur and Meghalaya and all these kind of things. I don't know how far these are true or not. These are again in the realm of theories, I would say. But the good thing is, right now, what really was bothering us and which was bothering was, and I think the United States, have probably got the message, they have understood. What was galling actually to Indians was that the Hindus, some kind of a genocide has already started in Bangladesh. They are definitely being harassed, their houses are being burnt. There have been numerous videos doing the rounds showing rape and pillage and arson Hindu targets. And only we were the one carrying forth the case, and nobody was talking about it. And the media, the Western media especially, was singing praises of Muhammad Yunus, but nobody was talking about the genocide of Hindus. United Nations also was not, and certainly not the US. And I think what the government this time did was probably some very deft backroom diplomacy channels, because if you notice something very interesting, Mr. Jaishankar actually after the elections has not particularly spoken very openly or given too many press conferences, which means that he is deftly, quietly working behind the scenes. And knowing Mr. Jaishankar, he probably, I think he has a direct pipeline to Anthony Blinken. He might have spoken to him. I'm not for a moment suggesting that I know of this. I'm assuming this would have happened. These concerns would have been put forward, and this shaky confidence in Muhammad Yunus to control this chain of events would also have been told. But what for me is something which I can see happening in front of me is that there has been pressure coming on the Indian government from Muhammad Yunus. It has been coming from these agent provocators in Bangladesh, that Sheikh Hasina is responsible for all this. In fact, even as when I'm doing the podcast, a news has come that somebody has now framed murder charges against Sheikh Hasina, which these kind of concocted events and trials, of course, are bound to happen. But to give over Sheikh Hasina, and I'm glad that the government, so far at least, they are standing by Sheikh Hasina. They are not willing to literally barter her away to buy some peace from Bangladesh. What India is also conveying a message through our diplomacy, through our realpolitik, is the fact that we are the big power in this region. We will do things according to our own interests, according to our strategic autonomy. We will not listen or take any nonsense from anyone. And the other brilliant thing we have done is that we have strengthened the BSF on the Indo-Bangladesh border. Too many incursions are not taking place at the moment. There are a lot of people who are waiting to come in from the other side, but they have stopped them. But we have really, as you say, the size strength, the force strength of the BSF has substantially increased on the entire border. This is also sending a message to Bangladesh that go this far and no further. Don't mess around with us. And very interestingly, something else has happened which is conveying the diplomatic finesse of India. The success we have achieved in bringing over Mizu, that Maldives fellow, on our side. Now he's making all these conciliatory positive noises about India. This was the same Maldives which had started this Go India Back campaign, and this president of Maldives, Mizu, was obviously behind that, but the same person now is singing a very different tune. This actually has come about right now in the midst of this Bangladesh crisis, and therefore this is again message which is being conveyed to the Bangladeshis that at the end of the day, whatever might happen, whether the Jamaat takes over or the ISI backed Jamaat takes over or the students or these ruffians take over, all these gundas take over, whoever takes over. At the end of the day, look at the geography of Bangladesh. This is a message which India is conveying to Bangladesh. The US can't come to your help all the time. Maybe they can set up some base somewhere or the other. Fine, great, wonderful. They can give you aid. The Pakistan cannot. They will have to take a very circuitous route. They don't have the money for that also to come to your aid all the time. The only country who can come to your help, the only country with whom you can have a trading relationship, a good trading relationship, is actually India. And a lot of people, if you don't know about this, know this, that the fulcrum of the Bangladesh industry rests on textiles, on the export of textiles, but the raw materials are all coming from India. Where are you going to get them from? Are you going to get them all the way from China or from the United States, or are you going to get it from Pakistan? It's laughable. At the end of the day, the Indian government also knows the Bangladeshis will have to do business with India and not the other way around. Even if we don't do any business with Bangladesh, it doesn't make a difference to us. A little bit of loss here and there, but not too much of it. The government knows it. And that is why when calls are being begun for the Indian government to be strident, to take some action in Bangladesh, actually, I'm very happy that the government has acted with a lot of restraint. They have acted with a lot of measure. The cause of the Bangladeshi Hindus has been highlighted, and now in the world, we galvanize people, the diaspora. I think the Indian government hand is also behind that. The diaspora has been taking out these marches in front of the White House also, in the United Nations, BBC headquarters, all these places. All the people who have been silent, or rather who are backing the other side, as we say. But now that is no longer the case. Those voices are being heard. There is acknowledgement of the fact that the Hindus are being persecuted in Bangladesh. But still at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, the fact is they are Bangladeshi citizens. We can't afford to get even 1 crore of these, as people saying this kind of influx can come into India. We can't afford to do that. That is not on the cards. And also, there is now a meeting going on between the RSS and the government, and I'm sure this issue is also being discussed. But knowing the Indian government, knowing the proclivities of Jaishankar, knowing the proclivities of the Prime Minister also, we will probably go forward in a restrained, measured manner. We will not take any hasty, any obdurate steps which can backfire on us. And as I said, so far, so good. The government has handled this entire thing with restraint, with caution. They have handled both the crisis with firmness also. Let's be very, very clear about that. And it is sending messages not only to the rest of the world, but it is sending messages to those opposition politicians in India who actually thrive on India's misery, who want the downfall of India both economically and strategically and geopolitically, to make gains, to get a foothold in power. Everybody knows about that particular game. And therefore, I think as long as the government treads this path, we are on the right course. The unexpected in both these crises can actually erupt anytime. Also, it's not gone away. We know about that, but so far, so good, as I say. And so on this note, I come to the end of this podcast. I hope you really enjoyed it. And as I said, do subscribe to my show. Share my video if you like it with your friends. And of course, till next time, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.